Richard stood in the doorway staring at me with that cold smile still stretched across his face. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too dangerous. Chloe was sitting on the edge of her bed gripping the blanket tightly while I tried to steady my breathing. Every instinct inside me screamed to run, but I knew one wrong move could destroy any chance we had of exposing him. Richard took another slow step into the room and repeated himself calmly, saying the tea downstairs was getting cold. I forced myself to smile even though my entire body was shaking inside. I told him I would come down in a minute after checking on Chloe. For a second, he said nothing. His eyes moved from me to Chloe and back again like he was trying to read our thoughts. Then he finally nodded and stepped out into the hallway. But before leaving completely, he turned back toward me and said something that sent ice through my veins. He said he would feel much better once I finally drank the tea. The moment his footsteps faded downstairs, Chloe jumped up in panic asking what we were going to do. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. But I quickly whispered that the emergency operator was still silently connected from my earlier call. I prayed they had heard enough to understand something was terribly wrong. Then another idea hit me. If Richard wanted me to drink the tea so badly, maybe we could force him into exposing himself in front of witnesses. I took a deep breath and told Chloe to stay upstairs no matter what happened. She grabbed my arm, terrified, begging me not to go back downstairs alone. I kissed her forehead and promised her that whatever happened next, none of this would ever be her burden again. Then I walked out of the bedroom feeling like I was marching toward something irreversible. The house downstairs was still full of laughter and conversation. Businessmen stood around holding coffee cups while soft jazz played through the speakers. It was sickening how normal everything looked while my entire world was collapsing. Richard spotted me immediately from across the room. His smile returned the second our eyes met. But now I could see through it clearly. Every charming expression felt fake and rehearsed. Every kind gesture suddenly looked calculated. He guided me toward the kitchen with his hand resting lightly against my back. Sitting on the counter beside the stove was a steaming porcelain teacup. My stomach twisted the moment I saw it. Richard picked it up carefully and handed it to me with an almost loving expression on his face. He told me he made it exactly the way I liked it. Honey, lemon, and extra chamomile for the headache. For one terrifying second, the entire room felt silent around me. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears while I stared down at the tea. Then I looked back at Richard and saw something chilling hidden behind his eyes, anticipation. He was waiting for me to drink it. I slowly raised the cup toward my lips before stopping halfway. Then I looked directly at him and asked a question that instantly changed his expression. If this tea is so good, why don't you take the first sip? I tried to say it playfully, but the tension underneath my voice was impossible to hide. For the first time all day, Richard looked caught off guard. He laughed nervously and said he made it specially for me. I smiled back and insisted couples should share everything. Several guests nearby turned toward us casually, amused by what they assumed was harmless flirting between husband and wife. Richard's smile began to tighten around the edges. He told me he already had coffee earlier, but I kept holding the cup toward him. The silence between us grew heavier with every second. Then suddenly, one of the guests jokingly told Richard to stop being stubborn and just take a sip already. Another man laughed and agreed. The pressure in the room shifted instantly. Richard could no longer refuse without looking suspicious. His face lost color. That was when I knew Chloe had been telling the truth from the very beginning. Richard slowly took the cup from my hands, but I noticed the tiny tremor in his fingers. He lifted it toward his mouth before stopping at the last second. Then his entire expression changed. The charming businessman disappeared completely, replaced by something darker and colder. He slammed the cup down onto the counter so hard tea splashed everywhere. Enough of this, he snapped. The entire kitchen fell silent. I stepped backward instinctively while several guests stared at him in confusion. Before anyone could react, loud knocking suddenly exploded at the front door. Richard froze. Two police officers entered the house moments later, followed by several more behind them. One of the officers immediately announced they had received an emergency distress call from the residents. Richard's face turned ghost white. The officers separated everyone while another detective approached me privately. I explained everything through shaking breaths while Chloe brought down the photos she had taken from Richard's office. When police searched his desk, they found the same unlabeled bottle Chloe photographed earlier. Later testing confirmed it contained a lethal toxin capable of triggering cardiac arrest symptoms within minutes. What shocked me even more was discovering how long Richard had been planning everything. Investigators uncovered massive hidden debts, forged financial documents, and emails showing he had been preparing to collect my life insurance money for months. The perfect husband I thought I married had actually been building a carefully planned trap around me from the beginning. Richard was arrested that same afternoon in front of all his business partners. I still remember the way he looked at me while officers placed him in handcuffs. There was no apology in his eyes, no regret. Only anger because his plan failed. But the moment that stays with me most is not his arrest. It is seeing Chloe standing safely beside me while police cars filled our driveway. My daughter was shaking from fear, but she never let go of my hand. In the weeks that followed, our lives completely changed. The investigation became public, Richard's company collapsed, and many people who once admired him suddenly claimed they always sensed something was wrong. But none of that mattered to me anymore. The only thing I cared about was the fact that Chloe and I survived. For a long time, I blamed myself for ignoring the warning signs and trusting someone capable of such evil. But eventually, I realized predators like Richard survive because they know exactly how to hide behind charm and kindness. He fooled everyone around him. The difference is my daughter saw through him before it was too late. Sometimes late at night, I still think about how close I came to drinking that tea. How one normal morning could have been my last. But then I remember the small crumpled note Chloe pressed into my hand upstairs. 5 desperate words written by a terrified teenage girl who refused to stay silent. Pretend to be sick and leave. Those 5 words saved my life.